Welcome to the Dementialand Serial Podcast, a story for everyone who knows someone living in or near Dementialand. My name is Suzka, and this is my story. The other side of the pavilion was where the residents lived, in little rooms they shared with strangers. Muffled music came from small black boxes nailed to the wall's corners, playing popular selections of institutional tunes. At first sight was an enormous ornate bird aviary. It was about 10 feet wide and towering up to a sizable bubbled skylight at the ceiling. In the center of the aviary was a tree, a living tree filled with canaries, finches, button quails, and twin spots. It was a birdcage sanctuary like no other I had ever seen. My mother was already sitting on her bed, dressed. She didn't look happy.
Where have you been? Okay, let's go home now.
She bladed her stare with the sharpest point and laid it at the center of my daughterness.
I want to go home.
She spat out those words clearly, in spite of her clamped-down dentures. The room had 2 beds. My mother's bed was closest to the door. A woman younger than my mother occupied the bed by the window. She looked to be about in her late 60s. A vanilla woman, large in stature and compact. Even in bed, I knew this woman had no curves or angles. Her hair was short, bobbed, and boxed to her head. She complimented the room's decor as if she was a piece of furniture. My mother sat on her bed with her back to the window. She was fully dressed and bus ready. The room ate up all the sound. I directed my attention to the woman on the other side of the room. Hello, my name is Suzka. I don't know if you met my mother. She's right over here. Her name is Violet. She'll be your roommate for a couple of days. My head was stuck. It refused to turn and give my mother all of my face. I made her 10-day stay sound like an overnight Tupperware party. And she heard me all right. I felt her stare at the back of my head, calling me a liar.
You don't know what you're talking about. Now let's go home.
The lady roommate said very little. She told me her name was Beulah, but everyone else called her B. She seemed to purposely chop off the better parts of her story. The room was stagnantly quiet, except for the rain. It lasted all day, harder and consistent, like the ringing of a telephone with no one to answer on the other end. I tried to help my mother get settled into her new space. B paid us no attention and guarded herself from falling into any conversation. She must have found the goings-on in her head to be more interesting than the book she had in her hand, and more entertaining than my mother or myself. I laid out the items my mother requested on the bed and hung her black suit in a side-tall metal closet. In the corner of my eye, I noticed my mother defiantly sat on the edge of her bed. Her eyes closed themselves, but remained staring at me from the inside, the gift God gave all mothers.
Wait, where's my camphor finique? You forgot my camphor.
Oh, it's here someplace. What's this?
How did that get in there? Well, just never you mind. I need it. Give it to me.
Well, it looks like our remote control from back home. You know, Mom, it won't work here in the hospital. I mean rehab center. Violet then grabbed the remote out of my hand and threw it up in the air.
There, are you happy now, Missy?
My mother looked at me with waxed eyes. The room seemed cold and dark, like the devil himself rolled in on a black carpet. There was something in my mother that cleared any hesitation of what was to come. She grabbed her rain bonnet, the gloves, her hairnet, the tubes of vitamin skin lotions, and tossed them all in the air as if it were confetti. Her eyes blinked and looked upwards. My mother was not confused at all. There was a stiff core of something, maybe strength or some kind of courage. It ran through her like a glass rod. She was fixed and determined. It was like two women living in my mother. I wasn't sure what to think. I was paralyzed to respond.
Oh, take me home. Take me home now. I want to go home.
At this point, I could only watch. My mother continued her outburst and threw her girdle, her brassieres, the cough drops, and the bananas into the air. She propelled the loose bottles of Ensure along with her Pope Bless rosary, each time tossing them harder and with more force. And in each shot, her aim got closer to the ceiling. Ensure came down first and torpedoed into a spin, missing me by barely an inch. I jumped back in fear of getting hit. That's when I fell against the metal closet behind me. If it weren't for my rubber-bottom boots, I would have slid down hard, hitting the floor. She then grabbed her shoes, the Italian boots, her Sergio Rossi, for God's sake, and propelled them in the air with both hands as hard as she could. They went fast and high, hit the ceiling, and crashed down broken on the linoleum floor. The sound triggered something inside of her. Her face changed. My mother surprised herself and smirked. She had found a way to turn the world upside down and shake out all its people. It was euphoric and distorted at the same time. My mother appeared elated and desperately determined. Looking up and using more force than she thought she had, she threw things high and hard as if she were trying to break through the ceiling's plaster, to crack an opening wide for the sun to come in and rescue her. In slow motion, in the final desperate toss to the merciful gods, my mother's eyes fell upon the sole surviving object saved from her rampage. A pitcher of half-filled water sitting on the table. Before I can get to her, she grabbed the pitcher with both hands. She lowered it between her knees and hurled it to the ceiling. The pitcher solidly hit the plaster. Its water met my mother on its way down. Oh, I couldn't help but notice that Bea appeared motionless. She barely blinked during the madness that just swept through the room. She remained cemented in holding her book through the entire storm. How could anyone fake reading in the middle of such bedlam? My head's concern bounced back and forth, visiting both sides of the room. Jesus, how could anybody be that drugged? Or maybe she's in a coma. Or maybe she's dead. Oh my God, I hope we didn't kill Beulah. Suddenly, my mother began to hiccup. Her wet hair jumped with every bout and spasm. Her face was shiny wet. I put a towel around her shoulders and absorbed most of the water. She looked up at me as if she wanted to slap me silly, and I wasn't sure why. Maybe she wasn't sure either. Then she did the strangest thing. She scooted off the bed and got on her hands and knees and delicately picked up every piece of clothing and every tiny bead from the floor. She collected the crystals and placed them in her pocket and carefully folded all her clothes on her bed as if she were a new bride. After a time, she looked at me and raised her fingers in the air and motioned for me to come close. Her eyes were big like baby onions.
Suzka, come close. I have to tell you something. Come here. You gotta talk to your father. He's driving me crazy.
Thank you for listening. My name is Suzka. I'd be mighty grateful if you subscribe to my Dementialand podcast. Y'all come back now.